go. Okay, so I did the first half of Niko. It's like 120 pages. So the basic plot is that the book is about a little boy named Niko. At the beginning of the book, he's about 6 or 7 years old, who's living with his pregnant mom and his dad in Beirut, so in Lebanon, in kind of the beginning of the Lebanese civil war, which was a civil war that lasted from 1975 to 1990 in Lebanon. It resulted in about or over 120,000 fatalities, and
massive migration to Canada.
yeah, 1 million person or almost 1 million people left the country. So this war often, or this civil war often, like affects them throughout the book. So they just start out there. Then Niko's mom is killed by a car bomb when he is about 7. Niko and his dad leave Lebanon and kind of country hop until they're unable to renew their passports. So Niko's dad sends him to live with his aunt and uncle in Montreal, while his dad, Antoine, kind of is supposed to try and build a life for himself and either build a home there or get enough money to come and join Niko. So Niko initially hates Montreal until his uncle kind of steps into the role of father and begins to kind of guide him and help him. And after that he starts to kind of excel in school and do better socially and become happy. Meanwhile, Antoine has a lot of trouble making any real money or establishing a foundation to build himself up on, and ends up he works for shipping companies, so he has a plan to kind of go or get as close to Montreal as possible by boat and then make his way to Niko. And on one of those boats, the boat capsizes. I don't know, it goes down, and my section ends with Antoine floating in the ocean with no one coming to help. So we assume he might have died.
It's quite the cliffhanger.
So there's a lot to go through, but so for kind of some themes and motifs are like reinvention, and a lot of characters often think about reinventing themselves. Like when Niko and Antoine leave Lebanon, they're kind of thinking of starting their lives over altogether. So Niko's uncle's name is Sammy, and Niko's aunt's name is Yvonne. Those are the people he goes and lives with in Montreal, and there they are also kind of in the process of reinvention. Sammy had a life before he came to Montreal, which he has completely left behind and actively tries to forget, which he talks about he thinks about at one point. And so he's kind of completely changed who he is to try and have a better life. Yvonne also came from Lebanon. They both originally lived in Lebanon, and she originally came from a very poor camp, but tried to turn herself into kind of a more modern woman, living a better life in Canada. And at one point she realizes she's still in her heart, thinks of herself or as who she once was, and decides kind of at the end of the section that she's going to completely reinvent herself and leave behind all of her past. And Niko as well kind of struggles with becoming someone new in Canada and leaving behind his past and his father, who he's really attached to. There's also kind of some responsibility. There's some dreams which appear a lot and seem to be important, like after Niko's mom, Elise, dies, he dreams about swimming through garbage bags. I'm not quite sure about that one. And he also dreams, as they're leaving Lebanon, he has a dream where he sees his mother in a rowboat, still with her kind of baby belly. And as they get further and further away, eventually she tips into the ocean and then flies away by flapping her arms. I'm also not completely sure about that one. Maybe something about how he's kind of leaving her behind. There's also the idea of pride and the kind of the dangers that come along with it. So often throughout the book, after they've left, Antoine turns down opportunities because of his pride, because he doesn't like asking for charity and asking for money, and he actually has the opportunity to go with Niko to Canada, which he refuses because he doesn't want to take their money, and kind of that separates them and has a really negative effect on their lives, it seems. Also, stories are kind of a recurring motif, as Antoine is always telling stories to Niko, and they're often about gods, and it kind of ties into the religious lens with how to Niko, Antoine, he's described as someone godlike, like all-knowing, all-powerful, and all-kind. So a lot of the book, there's not really chapters, although this section is split into 2 parts, and it's basically switches from perspective every once in a while. So from Niko, a lot is from Niko's perspective, which is very interesting because it's the perspective of a child for this whole section of the book. I think he starts at around 6 and he ends at around 11 or 13. So everything is like black and white morality. The law, like he sees the laws of nature as unreasonable. He doesn't understand after his mother dies why he can't will her back into existence, or why he can't bend like death basically to at least see her again. Which is also kind of a reflection of his grief, and he doesn't understand how the world works, or the kind of upper laws. Like he doesn't understand why they need money, or why they need money or passports, or why citizenship would be important, because they're so abstract that it he doesn't get it. And sometimes when he does understand the world, we see a different side of him emerge, where he becomes very like angry and aggressive. So this could be because switching to the...
You are over 8 minutes, but I know that you got a half a book.
Half a book.
That's not unlimited.
Okay, so switching to the psych lens.
Take all the time you need. Yeah. I'm trying not to cut you off.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Like he often has a really childish perspective on serious issues, like ones which he encounters a lot. So he has a lot of trauma in his life from living in a civil war. He describes there's a scene where he sees someone's shot in the face at point blank range. He sees someone's head blown off by dynamite, and like he doesn't, or he also sees a little boy who's dead, and his perspective is very childlike. When he sees the dead boy, he describes how if he were in a cartoon, he might paint the boy pink and he would come back to life. And that's kind of the only way he can understand it. So a big traumatic event in his life is the death of his mother. and we see him use a couple of defense mechanisms in response to this, where he's very confused. He wants to run away and escape and hide. So that's kind of what are they?
Defense mechanisms.
Well, yeah, well, which ones? I know which ones, but I forget their names. There's defense mechanisms, like kind of denial. Yeah, mostly denial. He wants to escape
Grief
that.
process. The stages of grief.
Yeah, grief. We didn't go over those. I don't know those.
Oh,
but,
no, okay, but denial is absolutely the first one. Yeah.
But yeah, grief process and denial. He wants to like deny that the whole thing is happening, and he doesn't want to experience it. Also, throughout the book afterwards, we see a lot of turning against the self, where he feels responsible for her death, and he thinks that bad things happened to him because, or that her death happened to him because he wasn't good enough. So he often apologizes to his father for killing her, even though he had absolutely no part of it. And later on, we also see kind of some maybe repression, where he'll ask for his mother, even though she's dead, maybe because he has blocked out her death so much that he's thinks she's still alive, but it's not from his perspective, so we never really see that. Her death also causes him to become overly attached to his dad, and that's kind of the other big traumatic event in his life, is when he has to leave, and he reacts in a lot of the same way, where he wants to run away, escape, curl up, and start everything over. So just wants to deny, just doesn't want to be a part of that reality. For the transgressive lens,
Let's make this the last sentence.
They're very transgressive throughout the book. They live in a place of civil war. They travel all the way, like halfway across the globe. And even when they're out of their country, they're still, they're very different from everyone else around them, and they're treated differently because of that, because they can kind of like racism, just because, yeah. And throughout the book, they're always very low socially. They don't have homes. They have to rely on others to just house them. And okay, a couple of social commentaries throughout the book is just kind of how difficult it is for refugees in the world to live anywhere or do anything, or people trying to escape war-torn countries. There's they can't work. For example, in the book, they can't work because they don't have visas, but they can't get visas without working to make the money. So it's kind of, they just become trapped at the very bottom of society. There's also a lot about family, how family is always united, and without family, there's no sense of purpose in your life. And last thing, absolute last thing, for the feminism lens, there's just that Niko only has a male figure in his life, and this may be why he sort of becomes more aggressive as the book goes on. Women are almost always seen as kind of equals to men. Elise was an equal to Antoine in their life, and was the one in the family who had a job. But Yvonne also kind of has her own story where she was never treated as an equal, and because she was a girl and the last girl of her family, she never had many opportunities, and no one ever thought to ask her what she wanted was never important. So that's framed in a negative light in the end.
Okay. 15 minutes, but doing good.
15 minutes.